how are you? Today we will be discussing about what is a session, what is a JWT, what is OAuth, and then we will be discussing about the Java example. We will be create the API and then call the API through the postman and check with the JWT example. Okay, so in the first part, we'll be discussing the points, authorization methods. Let's take a look at that. As we discuss, today we'll be discussing about the session JW2A or the first, what are the topics, what is the session based authentication, and what is JWT, what is OAuth, and finally we will see the example, and the Java source code will be given to you. In the description box you will find the link. Session based authentication is basically the client server communication. For example, the user through the login in the browser and then call to the server with a particular username and password. This username and password will be stored into the session memory if the user is valid user, and then send response back to the client, and client will save the session information into the cookie with the encryption form, and then every request the client will set auth request and get the data through the cookie information. This session will be stored into the cookie. If the cookie is disabled, then there is no communication will be happen between the client and server, because HTTP is the stateless protocol. And on the server side, we have to be build the layer for the session management. Either session will be stored into the memory or into the database, so it will be a overhead for the server to store the session and then check the valid session accordingly. And finally the session, if the session is valid, then response back to the particular request. So this is how the session based authentication in the traditional way we use. As we discussed, there are some problems. Number one, server need to be store the session and then use their session memory, and the client need to be store the information into the cookie and then in the encrypted form, and this is how you can the server and client can communicate. But when we are scaling our application, for example multiple servers, then the question is how we can store the session on multiple places or a single place. So it's definitely we have to be build the new layer or a new server which has store all the session information together and then entertain accordingly. So it will be again a overhead for the servers and then has to be store the session information. The second is the JWT. What is the JWT? JWT is basically stand for JSON Web Token. JSON Web Token actually are a token which is provided by the server, which has three parts. Number one is the header part, number two is the payload part, and number three is the signature part. As you can see in the diagram, the header part will show what are the algorithm will be used. For example, normally HS256 is the algorithm, and the type is JSON Web Token. Payload is basically a data which you want to store into the JWT. So probably you can store the role, the name, the user ID, or session information, and whatever the information you want to store, so you can store in set in payload section. The signature section is the basically is encrypt all the data into the base 64 format, and then store the data with the secret key, because every JSON Web Token is encrypted through the secret key, and secret key is provided by the server. For example, my secret key is ABC123. So I will be whatever the data I have passed to the JSON token, so it will be encrypted based on this asymmetric key. For decryption of this token, we definitely required secret key. The benefit of this algorithm, for example, if you want to authenticate, if some other website want to authenticate my website user, so he can do that through my secret key. If I provide him the secret key, then he can verify my user on their websites. So we can see later on. Okay, the third is JWT workflow. What is a workflow and how it will be communicating? As we discussed in the session base, it's kind of similar, but it's very lightweight. For example, browser will send the username and password to the server. Server has to be, validate their username and password. This is authentication through the username and password. This is normal authentication method, because nobody can be able to enter into the website with the username and password. So first we need to make sure that the information which are being sent through the user is valid and username password is valid, and then if the valid username password, then server will create a JWT token and then send back to the browser. Okay. The browser, this is a very lightweight token, and the browser has to be stored this token information in somewhere else. For example, he can be able to store, the user can be able to store into the cookie or into the HTTP cookie, or into the local storage or session storage, whatever the whatever the method you want to. So once the token has to be saved onto the browser, then every request every request to the server, token need to be sent into authorization header. Okay, so authorization header, the token need to be sent with the type of barrier. Okay, so once the request is sent to the, for example, if I want the customer list, so I will be send request to the server with the customer list, but in the header information I have to provide the barrier and then token information. So server will not be entertain your request if the token is not in the request, right? So server only has to be validate the token with their expiry, with their issuer date, with their claims and something, and then finally if all the things are valid, then it will be send response to the client. So it's kind of similar, but server do not need to be store any session, any user session information onto the server. With it's a lightweight, only issue this token and then validate the token on every request. So and browser and on a client side, there is no need to be store the session onto the cookie. You can use the local storage or session storage. Session storage persists when the browser is open. So once the browser is closed, session storage will be empty. And the local storage is very large, and it will be persist through particular time, whatever the time you have set in. So it's better you can use the session storage, or whatever the other method, like I have mentioned HTTPS client. So you can use this library in the Node.js, so you can store session information in that library. Uh, in the token, as you can see in the header part, we have algorithm HS256, the type of the token, the payload, and verify the signature, and everything has to be combined through the dot, and then finally the output is look like to be this. So in the final output, you can see encrypted data through the dot parameter. So first part is the header, second part is the payload, and third part is the signature. As we discussed, the JSON web tokens are stateless in the sense that the session information is not stored onto the server side, which saves the server memory and consumption. We already has discussed this point. Number two is the JSON web token are used to ensure the authenticity of the source. Data signing allow the receiver to verify whether the token was sent by an authentic resource. This ensures trust and security between the application and its user. Yes, definitely in the token we already have seen in the last of the slide the secret information into the token. So this secret information actually provided by the server. So server will already check the session is issued by him or somebody else. So definitely security will be maintained through the between the application and its user. JWT tokens can be used to authenticate the user onto multiple application, right? For this, the application will be required to share the same private key to sign and verify the token, right? So in the addition, each of the application token validation endpoints should be specified under the audience claims in order to gain the access to the shared token. So as a result, user can authenticate one time onto the authorization server, and if the authorization is guaranteed, that he can seamlessly use the other application that use the same private key to verify the JSON web token. So we will discuss this point in the detail when we are discussing OAuth, because OAuth will provide you the functionality that you can use the authorization. So we can see it later on, but in the notes you can be able to note that JSON web tokens used for the authentication of the user onto the multiple other sites or multiple applications. And what is OAuth? OAuth is basically, as you can see onto the client side, the authorization request. It's a basically authorization mechanism. Okay? For example, if do not want to use the username password, for example, I want to register on my side and I have already an account on Google or Facebook or Microsoft. So these all three has their own OAuth server, okay, their authorization server and resources server. So they so you can use the same username and password to the different other site. They will give you authorization access so that you can be able to do not provide the username and password to the other, only provide your authentication information, and then Google will give you a token, and then token will be valid for the other sites. So as you can see, the authorization request will set to the Memorial Bank authorization server, which is for example the Google server. It will be guaranteed access to you, okay, so you can be able to, it will first check your username and password and your authenticity, and then finally give you the will give you the token or guaranteed. Authorization will guaranteed will send to the again server, and then server will give you the access token. So this is two-way process. Number one is the guarantee, and number two is the access token, and then you can be able to access whatever the information onto the Memorial Bank resource server. So you can be able to access the information through the access token. So this is how the OAuth. OAuth is not a library; it's a complete a resource and authentication server mechanism, right? OAuth is, as its name suggests, is simply standard for the authorization, right? Authorization, and there is a difference between the authentication and authorization. Authentication is the process of checking the username and password, right? That is simple. And authorization is a process, either you have a rights to see the particular areas of the section, so that is authorization. So OAuth is simply authorization mechanism. With the OAuth, you can log in into the third-party website with your Google, Facebook, or Twitter or Microsoft account, without having it's necessary to provide your password, right? So as we can see already, you do not need to provide the passwords. It will Google will allow you, Google will check you with your username password and then allow you, and then give you a token. So this is where you can avoid of creating an accounts and remembering the password for each and every website that you use onto the internet. And OAuth 2 uses the HTTP for the communication between the client and authorization server, because the confidential information of the data, for the example client credential, and passing between the two applications. So definitely it's a secure communication between the client and server. OAuth is basically is based on access token concept. So when you authenticate yourself using, let's say, Google account into the third party website, so Google authorization server issue a access token to the web application with the approval of the owner. Thus the web application can be used that access token to access your data hosted into the resource server. In this case the Google, in this case of the Google or your Gmail inbox or contacts or photos are the resources. So the third party application can access those resources for an example view of your Gmail inbox using the OAuth. Hence, the OAuth is simple way to publish and interact with the protected resource data. It also a safer and more secure way to for the people to giving you access to their resources data. So it's very secure way. Do not need to provide the password, only the token will has to be communicated. Now we will be in the second part, we will look at the example. Hello, in the second of the part, this is an example which was built on Spring Boot. So in this example we have some model, we have some payload, repository, and REST controller, and then security features. So first take a look at that, how the example is working, and then I will explain you how this example is going to be working, and then we'll share you the source code, right? So uh, in the Postman we have the application is running on 9090. So API test call. Okay, once we click on this, the public content. So this is basically an API which is giving you content which is there is no authentication authorization required. There's no token required. So because in the because in security section we have a file which is let me show you. These are the three REST controller. Okay, so this is a security file, custom web security file. In the custom web security file, it is extended with the web security configurer adapter, and we have set some parameters like the API slash auth, authorization request. So these all URL will require the authentication, and these all type of request will be permitted. So there is no authentication required. So that's why API slash test slash all will be working fine. So you can be able to define your own classes or controller that do not require any authentication. So you can write after that, right? So you can paste, and then you can copy, and then paste accordingly, right? Okay, and then pass your like that. And if you can see in the test controller, so we have some methods, REST controller API slash test, and then we have a all methods. So you can see once we click on this, there is no problem, and then the public content will be displayed accordingly. Okay, and as you can see in the secure section, so we have an API slash secure, so it will be show you the secure information, right? So it will be required authentication, so it will not be entertained because it's a get method, slash hello API slash secure slash hello. For example, let me write API slash secure slash hello. Okay, so you can see that there is unauthorized error will be sent by the server, because it will not be entertained until the proper request through the authentication token, JW token, so you cannot be able to see the data of, right? So similarly, you can be able to define your own classes, for example your product classes or repositories, or everything, so you can be able to secure as much as possible, and will only be entertained through the JW web token. So let's take a look at how the application will be generating the token. So we have a section which is sign up section. So this is a sign up API. Okay, API slash auth slash sign up. As you can see in the code, uh, auth section. So this is a sign in method, and this is a sign up method. So in the sign up method, it will be check the username is already exists, and check the email is already exists, and then finally has to be create the user, and then create their roles accordingly, and then save into the repository section. And once the repository sections will send, then definitely there is no problem with this sign up of the method, right? So we can be able to do some sign up process. Okay, in the sign up process we held it already, so you can be able to provide the information through this this way: username, and then email, and then password, and then so server will receive the sign up request. So this is basically a class. So you can see this is the class in the request section, the sign up request class. So same parameter will be used: the username, the email, and their role, and their passwords accordingly. So this is the class which is exists in payload request section. Or similarly for the login, you can use username, passwords, and so you can use these of the classes. So let me pass this username and password, and then send. So you can see the message user registered successfully, and then there are some other information which is sending you. So it means that user has been created. So let's take a look at in the database side. We already has 2 user, and okay, JSON. Okay, let me check with the database. Okay, so we actually using some other database. Okay, this one. So in the user section, so we see this new user has been created with the username, password, and other. So I was looking the wrong database, right? So this user has been created with the password, and let's try with the login functionality. So the username is username. Let me copy the username, password, and password 123456. So in the sign in section, I need to provide the username and the password. For example, if I pass the wrong password, what happened? The invalid username and password, right? So it will give you the error. So if I pass the correct username, password, what happened? Okay, so you can see the user information with their roles, with their email address, with their status true, and then finally we will receive the access token, and this is the type the barrier token received from the server. And how? So you can see in the authentication section, so we have another post mapping which is signing. So server will definitely use the username, password authentication, get username, and then password, and this authentication manager will check the authentication, and then finally if the authentication or is authenticated, then it will be give you the error if the username, password are wrong. or invalid guaranteed. So if it is true, then authentication will be given to you. Otherwise, in the catch section, it will give you the username password, invalid username password, right? So once the token is valid, so uh, once the security context is so it will be set the security context with the authentication and then generate the token accordingly. So this is the JWT util class which takes the input as authentication and then give you the JSON web tokens. And then finally has to be authentication class, we get the principals and then get the user detail information and then get the user roles accordingly, and then finally the response will be sent to you to the user with the JWT token with the username, password and roles. So you can see in the diagram, so you can see the user information and their access token at tag. So this will be generated through this. So JWT, so we have seen the class which is JWT util class, which normally in the security section, so we can see that. So in the JWT util this class, so this is a class created by the custom, so it will use the secret key and their expiration minutes. So these information at the rate of value notation, so we actually getting this information through the application dot properties. So we can you can see that there is an app dot security. You can use any security key which you can use for the token, and then you can use the expiration time, whatever the time you want to use for the token expiry. So I will be use 24 hours. So these two information will be set through this application, so we can get this and then generate the token. The token will take the authentication, get principal information and then pass to the user detail implementation, and finally js.builder will build the set the subject, set the issuer ID, expiration date with the sign in, and then finally has to be generate the token. So and then finally we have find another method which is validate the JSW token. So it will be take the token as an input and then get the parse the claim and then set the token secret with the parser. So it will be showing you whether the token is valid or not, or if it is not valid then it will be signature error, it will be malform error, it will be expired error, it will be unsupported error, it will be illegal error. So you can be able to check with the token. So this is a main file, and then there is another class which is saying only one per request. So I will be explaining you later once I have logged into, right? So I need to save this token. For example, I am storing this token information. I have saved this token information. Okay, so I need to call to the secure, right? This is the secure page, right? So once we click on this, we are getting unauthorization. So we need to pass the token information into the authorization section. So on authorization section, I need to select the type, which is a barrier token, and then we have to whatever the token is, we need to set into the token section, and then finally has to be press the send button. So okay, so this application will receive the secure request from the header and it will show you the result. So because as you can see how this happened, I have printed some log. So as you can see, whatever the token we have provided, the system has to be printing this username. So as you can see, there is a class one request per request filter. So this class will actually have an override method do filter internally. So actually whenever the request is sent to the server, this method will be called, right? So it will show the print do filter print. So as you can see, we have this is printing on this side, and then on the request side we have received the token. Okay, the system will parse the token accordingly, and then finally has to be validate the token through the JSON web token. So parsing is another method, parse JWT token. So this method is basically, this is a method. So it will get the authorization parameter from the request. In every request it will get the authorization request. This authorization request do not have the barrier type, so it will be giving you the null or wrong information. So it will be give you the token, and then finally has to be fetch the token for from the substring and minus the this barrier keyword, and then given to you to the server. The server will actually has to be parse this token, validate the token, and then get the token where username, password is all the things are good. Then it will set into the authentication, set into the authentication class. So this is how the things are to be checking accordingly, and then uh, give you the username or password, and then finally whatever the request you has made, so it will be redirected to your page. So this is how you can be able to call any API. So whatever the information, for example, if you can see the user detail information, so you can be implement the user detail classes through the username, passwords, and user detail collections, and then authority and something and the collections. So you can be able to see the username, password, and account, and all the things into the user detail section. And user detail service implementation, this is implementation from user detail. These all classes are from as you can see, this class is coming from security, Spring Boot security class. So you need to be implement this class, and then has to be checked the username or password accordingly. So it will be checked the username from the username database. So it will be use the user repository. So these are the repositories. User repositories is basically from JPA repository, where we can be able to find the username and then passwords, and you can be able to define your own methods. So we have created to do. The to do is basically a CRUD which having the username, the to do information, which is the from name. So in the to do section we can see the name, the status. So you can see that this information. So uh, and you can see, for example, in a to do controller, for example, the API slash to do slash list. Okay, so let me copy this. Okay, so API slash to do slash list, and then authorization token, the barrier token. So we have pass, sorry, copy this token, and then send. So you can see the to-do list is coming with the name, ID, and status. So similarly, as you can see in the log file, there is a to-do request, and then you can see the data is coming from the servers. Okay, and we have implemented paging, sorting, searching, and everything. So in the Postman you can see the data is coming from the server. So we can do the paging 1 2 3 4 5 10 9 10 12 8 13 and 14. Okay, so you can see that these all data are coming. So once you pass the parameter, the other parameters, the paging parameter, like the query, the page size, and sort by, and sort direction, so you can be able to get the data through the paging format. So in the paging format you can see that for example, let me call this. Okay, because we do not provide the token, to do list, not found. Okay, list 2, let me check with the list 2. Okay, sorry, search. page size, page index. Okay, so you can see we have passed the page number, and then page size is 5, and sort by ID and sort direction by descending. So as you can see, the 14 and 13 and 12 and 10 and 9, only 5 record will be displayed, and it will be showing the total item was 10, the total page was 2 because 5 and 5, and current page is 1 and page size is 5. So in the sort direction, if I made the changes, so you can see one is on the first and second. So this is working through the and you can be able to pass, for example, uh, test. So as you can see, there is no data for the test. For example, if I task, so it will be, showing the record, and then it will be showing total item was 6 instead of 10, and then it is showing the page by page, and then sorting. So searching, sorting, toggle sorting, and pagination, and all the things are working on this request. So you can use this API, and this quite simple of the code is written. We have received this parameter, and then we have used some sorting, and then searching through the page index, and then finally we have created a to do search repository. So we have, used the query parameter. So for example, if you are displaying the data from multiple of the table, so and you want to search the data accordingly onto the multiple table, then you can create the view and then pass their view name to there. So you can be able to match the data with the different parameter with the different tables are coming from. So you can play around with this. So this is how and the model section, we have a to do section, we have to do classes, we have a user classes, and we have role classes, and enum role for the user and moderator and admin. We already has discussed the login sign up request. So response, we have JWT token. The response, we have to be sure the token and their token information, and the username and password and role information. Messages response is basically a class which send you the message to the user. So you can see that there is a template for the messaging. So the total items, because it will be required when you are working with the pagination site. So you can use this message response, right? So we have created two methods. Either you want to use this one or this one, because this is the non-paging type of the request, and this is for the paging type of the request. So you can use that. And repository, we have used the role repository, to-do repository, user repository, and user repository, and everything. And you can define your own custom methods. And we already has discussed the REST controller, security, JSON web tokens, and services details. So, and last thing, which is, set up the data. So once we run the application, so we need to set up some roles, right? So we have used the action listener, which is a context refresh event. So if you can implement this class, so this method on application event will be called. So we have already has written, if the user have role not created, then create accordingly. So once you run the application, no need to worry, this file already will be called, and then create these three roles accordingly. So, and in application section, we have defined the database. We have username, password, we use the Hibernate dialect, and then and then secret key and information and port. So and then home.xml file, we have defined some parent classes with the security, and whatever the module is, we have used the module approaches, and we use the dependencies, Spring Boot web dependency, dev tool for automatic restarting the web server once you have made the changes. And JPA, we use the JPA, we use Spring Security for the implementation of which pages are allowed, which pages are not allowed. And we have used some validations, and these are the validation from basically a model file validation, which you can use some validation techniques, not blank or something like that. And we have used the JSON web token, so io.json web token, their number, their artifact ID, and then dependency for the testing, and these are basically a build section, which if you are running the application outside of IntelliJ, so you can use this settings accordingly. So hopefully you guys have understand how the application is running and how the JSON web tokens are communicating. So I will be share you the source code into the description section. You will be find, and you can download freely. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, then please don't hesitate to call me. Thank you. Bye.